My name is Nadia, and I am 21 years old. For as long as I can remember, I have been working hard, saving every penny for my future. After my parents' divorce, my father became my rock. He created a special college fund for me before his sudden death. Everything changed when my mother remarried a wealthy man with a daughter. I never expected the shocking demand that would turn my world upside down. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from. Please like and subscribe if family betrayal stories resonate with you. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up as the only child of what I thought were two loving parents. My childhood memories are filled with weekend trips to the park, bedtime stories, and family dinners, where we would share the events of our day. While both my parents showed their love in different ways, my father James and I shared a special bond that only grew stronger over time. Dad was an accountant at a mid-sized firm in our town. He worked long hours, especially during tax season, but he always made time for me. Every Saturday morning without fail, we would have our special father-daughter breakfast at a local diner. Over pancakes and orange juice, he would teach me about financial responsibility in ways my young mind could grasp. Nadia, sweetheart, he would say, cutting his pancakes into neat triangles. Money itself is not what matters in life. What matters is the security and opportunities it can provide if you are wise with it. By the time I was 12, I had my own savings account that I proudly deposited my allowance and birthday money into. Dad would take me to the bank holding my hand as I filled out the deposit slips, explaining concepts like interest and compound growth. These might seem like boring topics for a child, but the way my father explained them made them fascinating to me. We shared so many dreams together. He would listen intently as I changed my mind about what I wanted to be when I grew up almost monthly. One week a veterinarian, the next a judge, then a marine biologist. No matter what career path I was enthusiastic about, he would research it with me, showing me what education I would need and encouraging me to aim high. Education is the one thing nobody can ever take away from you, Nadia. He told me countless times. Whatever you do in life, make sure you get the best education you can. Everything changed when I was 14. I came home from school one afternoon to find both my parents sitting in the living room, their faces somber. That was the day they told me they were getting divorced. Through my tears, I learned that my mother had been having an affair with a businessman she had met through her job at a luxury real estate agency. The next few months were a blur of arguments, tense conversations behind closed doors, and my mother gradually moving her belongings out of our house. When it came time to decide custody arrangements, my mother fought hard to have me live with her. Not as I would later understand because she particularly wanted me around, but because it would look better for her if she had custody of her child. But I chose to stay with my father. I could not forgive my mother for breaking apart our family, and the thought of living with her, and potentially this new man in her life, made my stomach churn. Though I was only 14, the court took my preference into consideration, and I remained in our family home with Dad. After the divorce was finalized, my father sat me down for a serious conversation. Nadia, I want you to know that no matter what has happened between your mother and me, I will always make sure you are taken care of. He said, his voice steady, but his eyes revealing his pain. I have started a college fund for you. It is not huge yet, but I will add to it every month. When the time comes, you will have what you need to get your education without starting your adult life in debt. I hugged him tightly, feeling both his love and his determination to give me the best future possible, despite our changed circumstances. From that day forward, I would occasionally see him working on household budgets late at night, carefully allocating a portion to my college fund, even when money was tight. We made a promise to each other that I would work hard in school, apply for scholarships, and do my part, while he built this financial foundation for my education. It became our shared mission, something that bonded us even more deeply during those post-divorce years. Life settled into a new normal. I saw my mother occasionally stilted visits at restaurants or shopping malls where she would ask superficial questions about school and friends before inevitably checking her phone or talking about herself. Meanwhile, Dad and I created our own traditions and routines, a team of two against the world. Then just 2 months after my 18th birthday and high school graduation, the unthinkable happened. My father suffered a massive heart attack while at work. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. The man who had been my world, my support, my guide, was gone in an instant. The grief was overwhelming. I felt like I was drowning in it, barely able to function through the funeral arrangements, and the flood of sympathy casseroles and card from neighbors and my father's colleagues. My mother appeared, of course, appropriately somber, in an expensive black dress, offering platitudes and brief hugs before returning to her new life. In the aftermath, as I sorted through Dad's papers with the help of his longtime friend and attorney, Michael, we discovered the college fund my father had been so dedicated to building. It contained just over $78,000, not enough for 4 years at an elite private university, but sufficient for a good state school if I was careful, and supplemented it with part-time work and scholarships. Holding the account statements in my trembling hands, I made a silent vow to my father. I would use this money exactly as he intended. I would get my education, build a secure future, and make him proud. It was the last gift he could give me, and I would honor it, and him. "He was so proud of you, Nadia," Michael told me, his own eyes moist with grief for his friend. "James talked about you all the time, about how smart and determined you are. He believed in you completely." Those words became my anchor in the storm of grief. I would live up to my father's belief in me. I would make something of myself that would honor his memory and his sacrifices. The college fund was not just money. It was my father's love and faith in me transformed into opportunity. After the initial shock of my father's death subsided, my mother suddenly reappeared in my life. She showed up at the small apartment I had moved into near the community college, where I had enrolled for my freshman year, armed with containers of gourmet food and offers of support that felt years too late. "Darling, I know we have not been close, but I want that to change," she said, surveying my modest living space with poorly disguised judgment. "You have been through so much, and families should stick together during difficult times." I was suspicious of this newfound maternal concern, but too emotionally exhausted to question it deeply. Soon after, she invited me to dinner to meet her new husband Gregory and his daughter, my stepsister Amelia, who was 19, just a year older than me. Their house, or rather mansion, was in the most exclusive neighborhood in our city. With its circular driveway, manicured gardens, and imposing front doors, it screamed wealth and privilege. I felt immediately out of place in my simple dress and secondhand car. Gregory met me at the door, a tall man with silver hair and the confident handshake of someone used to commanding rooms. "Nadia, welcome. Your mother has told us so much about you." His smile did not reach his eyes, which were already assessing me, determining my value in his world. And then there was Amelia. She floated down the grand staircase in designer clothes that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her long blonde hair perfectly styled her smile, as practiced and empty as her father's. She gave me an air kiss near my cheek, careful not to actually make contact. "So you are the mysterious daughter," she said, her tone making it clear she found nothing actually mysterious or interesting about me. "Mom has been just dying for us to meet." The fact that she referred to my mother as Mom, after what could not have been more than a year or two, sent an uncomfortable chill through me. But I smiled politely and followed them to a dining room where the table was set with china and crystal that probably cost more than my semester's tuition. Throughout that first dinner, I tried my best to build connections with these strangers, who were now technically my family. I asked Amelia about her interests in education, only to learn that she had already dropped out of 2 expensive private colleges because they were not the right fit for her. "Academics are not really my thing," she explained with a careless wave of her hand. "I am more interested in experiences and living life to the fullest. Daddy understands that college is not for everyone." Gregory nodded indulgently at his daughter. "Amelia has an entrepreneurial spirit. The traditional education path is too constraining for creative minds like hers." My mother, whom I barely recognized in her elegant clothes and new sophisticated manner, beamed at them both. "Amelia is thinking of starting a luxury lifestyle blog. Gregory is going to set her up with all the equipment and connections she needs." I sat there, fork suspended over my plate, trying to reconcile this woman with the mother I had known growing up. the one who had lectured me about the importance of good grades and practical career choices. Now she was enthusiastically supporting a clearly spoiled young woman's vague dream that would undoubtedly be funded entirely by her father. As the weeks passed, my mother made sporadic efforts to include me in their family life. Invitations to dinners, shopping trips, and even a weekend at their lake house came my way. I accepted some out of a lingering hope that perhaps I could salvage some kind of relationship with my mother, but each interaction left me feeling more like an outsider. The contrast between their lavish lifestyle and my careful budgeting became increasingly apparent. While I worked part-time at the campus bookstore, took a full course load, and cooked most of my meals at home to save money, Amelia spent her days shopping, brunching with friends, and planning expensive trips, all funded by her doting father and my increasingly obsequious mother. It did not take long to notice my mother's blatant favoritism toward Amelia. She would gush over Amelia's new haircut or latest purchase, while barely acknowledging my Dean's List achievements. When I mentioned applying for a competitive summer internship, my mother's response was a distracted, "That's nice, dear," before turning to ask Amelia about her plans for an upcoming music festival. Amelia, for her part, seemed to swing between ignoring me completely and showing flashes of jealousy when any attention came my way. When Gregory once made a passing comment about my good grades, Amelia immediately launched into a story about a famous photographer she had met at a gallery opening who had totally loved her eye for composition. Gregory remained cordial but distant with me. I was clearly an obligation that came with marrying my mother, not someone he had any interest in knowing or supporting. His world revolved around Amelia fulfilling her every whim, while espousing the virtues of finding your own path, whenever her lack of direction or ambition became too obvious to ignore. As I observed this dynamic, I gradually pulled back, focusing on my studies and building my own life. I had my small circle of friends at college, my part-time job, and my clear goals for the future. I visited my mother's home less frequently, making excuses about assignments and work schedules that were not entirely untrue. It was during a Thanksgiving dinner at their home, about a year after my father's death, that I first noticed subtle comments from my mother about my advantages compared to poor Amelia. "It must be so nice to have your education all planned out for you," my mother remarked as I mentioned my plans to transfer to the state university the following year. "Some people have to figure things out on their own without everything handed to them." I nearly choked on my cranberry sauce. The insinuation that I, who had lost my father and was working while attending school, somehow had an easier path than Amelia, who lived in luxury with her every need catered to, was so absurd I could not immediately formulate a response. "Well, we all have different challenges," I finally said, trying to keep the conversation civil. Amelia smirked across the table. "True. Some people just do not understand the pressure of finding your authentic path without settling for the obvious choices." I left that dinner with a growing sense of unease. Something had shifted in my mother's attitude toward me, a resentment that seemed to be building beneath her superficial attempts at inclusion. I did not understand it yet, but I would soon enough. My first year of college passed in a blur of classes, study groups, and late nights at the library. While I missed my father terribly, especially during milestones he should have been there to witness, I channeled my grief into determination. I would make him proud by excelling academically just as we had planned together. By the end of my freshman year, my hard work had paid off. I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA, made connections with professors who recognized my potential, and secured a research assistant position for the summer. But the crowning achievement came in late May when I received an email that left me staring at my computer screen in disbelief. I had been awarded a prestigious merit scholarship that would cover nearly 75% of my tuition for my sophomore year at the state university where I planned to transfer. The scholarship was competitive, awarded to only 5 students in the entire state, based on academic excellence, community involvement, and demonstrated financial need. My hands shaking with excitement, I immediately called my mother. Despite our strained relationship, she was still my only living parent, and some childish part of me craved her approval and pride. "Mom, you will not believe what just happened. I got the Wilson Merit Scholarship. It is going to cover most of my tuition next year." There was a pause before my mother responded. her voice notably lacking the enthusiasm I had hoped for. "Oh, that is nice, Nadia." "Listen, can I call you back? Amelia and I are looking at potential venues for her blog launch party, and the event planner just arrived." The deflation I felt was immediate and crushing. "Sure, no problem," I managed to say, my voice smaller now. "It is not important. We can talk later." "Great, thanks, honey. Oh, and we should schedule dinner soon. There are some things we need to discuss regarding Amelia's education situation." After hanging up, I sat on my bed, the scholarship notification still open on my laptop, feeling a complex mix of pride in my achievement and hurt at my mother's dismissal. I eventually called my best friend Jasmine, who responded with the appropriate level of screaming and congratulations, partially healing the sting of my mother's indifference. 2 days later, I found myself at my mother and Gregory's home for the promised dinner. As we sat around their massive dining table, I tried again to share my news, hoping for at least a token acknowledgement. "So, as I mentioned on the phone, I received the Wilson Scholarship for next year. It is really competitive, and it will make a huge difference for my finances." "That is fortunate timing," Gregory commented, cutting precisely into his steak, "especially given the current situation with Amelia's education." I looked between them confused. "What situation?" My mother and Gregory exchanged glances before my mother sighed dramatically. "Amelia has decided that her current university is not meeting her needs. The creative writing program is far too rigid and conventional." Amelia nodded solemnly. "They want me to write like everyone else. They do not understand my unique voice and perspective." What they were not saying, but what I understood immediately, was that Amelia had likely failed her freshman year. This would be her second college failure by my count. "She has found a much better program at Westfield University," my mother continued, naming a private arts college known for its prestige and astronomical tuition. "The professors there will appreciate her creative approach." "That is great," I said neutrally, already sensing where this conversation was heading. Gregory leaned forward slightly. "Family support is important in these transitions. We all need to rally around each other in times of change." Throughout the rest of dinner, the conversation circled around Amelia's plans, her exciting new beginning, and the resources she would need. My scholarship was not mentioned again, effectively buried under the apparent crisis of Amelia needing yet another fresh start at another expensive school. Over the following weeks, I noticed increased interest from my mother in my financial situation. She began asking pointed questions about my college fund, how much remained after my freshman year, and my plans for the money now that I had the scholarship. "That scholarship is quite generous," she commented during one phone call. "I imagine you will barely need to touch your college fund now." "The scholarship covers tuition, but there are still living expenses, books, and other costs," I explained, "and I want to keep some in reserve in case I decide to pursue graduate school after my bachelor's degree." "Graduate school, is that really necessary?" "You know, not everything requires such extensive education. Look at Gregory. He built his business with just a bachelor's degree." The questions became more frequent, along with comments comparing my privileges to Amelia's struggles. According to my mother's revised narrative, I had everything handed to me while poor Amelia was bravely forging her path against all odds. "It must be nice to have everything all planned out and paid for," my mother said during one particularly tense lunch. "Not everyone has a safety net like you do. Some people have to find their own way without financial support." I nearly spat out my water. "Mom, my safety net, as you call it, exists because Dad worked hard and sacrificed to create it for me. He skipped vacations, drove an old car, and budgeted carefully to build that fund. It did not appear by magic." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "James always was obsessed with planning and saving. Sometimes life requires more flexibility. Amelia understands that success comes in many forms, not just following the conventional path." With each interaction, my suspicion grew. Something was brewing beneath these strange conversations and pointed questions. I just had not yet realized how far my mother was willing to go. The text message from my mother came on a Wednesday afternoon as I was leaving the campus library. "Need to have important family discussion. Dinner at our house Friday at 6. Please make sure you are there. Critical for all of us to talk." The formal tone and insistence were unusual, even with our strained relationship. A sense of foreboding settled in my stomach as I drove to their house that Friday evening. I had considered making an excuse, some suddenly arising work emergency, but curiosity and a faint hope that perhaps this was a step toward genuine reconnection pushed me to go. I should have listened to my instincts. When I arrived, I was led to the formal dining room rather than the kitchen where we usually ate for family dinners. The table was set for four with documents neatly stacked at Gregory's place. My mother seemed tense, her smile too bright, her movements jittery as she served a dinner that I would barely touch. After an uncomfortable meal filled with superficial chit-chat, Gregory cleared his throat and folded his hands on the table. Nadia, we asked you here tonight because we have an important family matter to discuss, one that requires maturity and understanding from all involved. My mother nodded, reaching over to pat Amelia's hand. We are family, and families support each other, especially in times of need. What is going on? I asked, looking between their serious faces, noticing Amelia's barely concealed smirk. As you know, Amelia has been accepted to Westfield's creative writing program, my mother began. It is an incredible opportunity, one that could launch her career as a writer and influencer. Gregory nodded solemnly. The program is prestigious with connections to publishing houses and media companies. It is exactly what Amelia needs at this crucial juncture. I nodded slowly, still not understanding why this required a formal family meeting. That sounds great for her. The thing is, my mother continued, her voice taking on a practiced, sympathetic tone that sent warning signals through my body. Westfield's tuition is quite substantial. With housing and all the necessary equipment for Amelia's blog and creative projects, we are looking at significant expenses. Gregory slid a spreadsheet across the table, showing detailed calculations of costs. We have been discussing family resources and how we might all contribute to this important investment in Amelia's future. A cold realization began to dawn on me. What exactly are you suggesting? My mother reached across the table as if to take my hand, but I kept mine firmly in my lap. Sweetheart, we have been thinking about your college fund. The room seemed to tilt slightly. My college fund? What about it? Well, you have that wonderful scholarship now, she said, her voice sickly sweet. And you are attending a state school with much lower tuition than Westfield. You really do not need as much financial support as Amelia does right now. I stared at her in disbelief. Are you actually suggesting that I give my college fund the money Dad set aside specifically for my education to Amelia? Not all of it, Gregory interjected, as if that made the request reasonable. Just a portion to help with Amelia's first year. We would consider it a loan from you to the family. A loan. Would you be signing something to that effect, with terms for repayment? I asked, already knowing the answer. Gregory shifted uncomfortably. Well, no, that would be unnecessarily formal between family members. It would be an understanding between us. I turned to my mother, hoping against hope that she would recognize the absurdity of what they were asking. Mom, Dad created that fund for my education. It was his final gift to me. And your father would want you to share, she countered, her eyes hardening. He would not want you to be selfish when your stepsister has a real need and opportunity. The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. She had never called Amelia my stepsister before, always introducing her as my daughter, as if trying to create an artificial closeness that had never existed. You do not need it anymore. Amelia spoke up, her voice casual, as if we were discussing borrowing a sweater rather than tens of thousands of dollars. Your school is basically paying you to go there, and mine costs actual money. It makes sense for you to help out. I looked at the three of them, this family unit that had formed without me, now united, in their expectation that I would hand over my father's final gift, his years of sacrifice and planning, to a girl who had already squandered opportunities at 2 colleges. How much are you expecting me to give? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Gregory consulted his spreadsheet. We calculate that $50,000 would cover Amelia's first-year tuition and necessary expenses. $50,000, nearly 2/3 of my entire college fund. I felt physically ill. This is not a reasonable request, I said, finally finding my voice. That money was specifically set aside for my education by my father. You are being selfish, my mother snapped, her pleasant facade cracking. Amelia needs this chance. You have already had so many advantages that she has not. Advantages? I echoed incredulously. Like what? Losing my father working part-time while maintaining a full course load, living in a tiny apartment while Amelia drives a luxury car and goes on shopping sprees. That is not what I meant, my mother backpedaled. I meant that you have always had this clear path, this safety net. Amelia is still finding her way. Finding her way through her third college attempt, you mean? I said, anger finally breaking through my shock. Amelia's face flushed with anger. Not everyone fits into the boring conventional box of good grades and scholarships. Some people have actual creative talent that takes time to develop. The argument escalated quickly from there. As voices raised and accusations flew, the truth began to emerge in fragments. My mother had already told Amelia she could have the money. She had essentially promised my college fund to her stepdaughter without consulting me, assuming I would simply comply with her demand. I do not understand why you are being so difficult about this, my mother said, frustration evident in her voice. We are not asking for all of it. You would still have enough for your basic needs. It is my money, Mom. Money that Dad saved for me specifically. Well, technically, it is still in my name as the custodian, she countered, and the calculating look in her eye sent a chill through me. I could simply transfer it if I wanted to. Gregory Ever, the businessman, tried to steer the conversation back to calmer waters. Let's all take a breath here. Nadia, try to look at this logically. You have your scholarship, you have a part-time job, and you have chosen an affordable university. Amelia needs more financial support for her particular educational path. It is a simple matter of distributing resources where they are most needed. Most needed, I repeated, or most wanted. Has Amelia even shown any real commitment to this program, or is it just the next shiny object after she failed at her previous attempts? That is enough, my mother snapped. The simple fact is Amelia deserves this opportunity more than you need that extra money sitting in an account. The room went silent. There it was, finally, the raw truth laid bare. In my mother's eyes, Amelia deserved my father's sacrifice more than I did. Amelia deserved my future security more than I did. Amelia, who had been in her life for a fraction of the time I had, who had never shown any real effort or commitment to anything, deserved more than her own daughter. I stood up, my legs shaking, but my resolve firm. I need to think about this. I said, not because I was actually considering their outrageous demand, but because I needed to escape that house and clear my head. Do not take too long, my mother said, her voice cold. Amelia needs to confirm her enrollment soon, and we need to make financial arrangements. As I drove home in tears, one phrase kept echoing in my mind. Amelia deserves it more than you. My own mother had looked me in the eye and essentially said that I was less deserving, less valuable, less important than her stepdaughter of barely 2 years. In that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I arrived back at my apartment in a fog of shock and betrayal. The tears I had held back during the confrontation now flowed freely as I paced my small living space, trying to process what had just happened. My own mother had not only asked me to give away my father's final gift, but had implied she might simply take it if I refused. After hours of alternating between sobbing and staring blankly at the wall, a strange calm began to settle over me. The pain was still there, a deep ache in my chest, but alongside it grew a steely resolve. My father had worked too hard, sacrificed too much for his final act of love to be redirected to a spoiled girl who had no connection to him. The next morning, I called Michael, my father's friend and attorney, who had helped me after his death. I explained the situation, my voice breaking occasionally, but my determination clear. I am so sorry, Nadia, Michael said, his voice filled with genuine concern. What your mother is suggesting is inappropriate, to say the least. Let me look into the legal status of the account. Later that day, Michael called me back with both good and concerning news. The fund is technically in your name with your mother as custodian until you turn 21, which is only a few months away. Legally, she should not be able to simply take the money for another purpose, especially since your father's intent is well documented in his will and other papers. However, I prompted when he paused. However, I am concerned about the pressure she could apply. If she has a relationship with the bank, if she convinces them she is acting in your interest, there could be complications, and family financial disputes can get messy and expensive to fight. What do you recommend? I asked. If you are absolutely certain you want to protect this money, the safest approach would be to transfer it to accounts only you can access, preferably at a different bank. Once you turn 21, you have full legal control, but given what you have told me, I would not wait. That afternoon, I began researching my options. I opened new accounts at a different bank across town, one where neither my mother nor Gregory had any connections. I gathered all the documentation of my father's intentions for the money, including relevant sections of his will and letters he had written to me about my education. I also began documenting every conversation with my mother and Gregory about the money. After our dinner confrontation, my mother had sent several text messages pressuring me for a decision which I carefully saved. I recorded phone calls where she mentioned the fund with the legal single-party consent in our state. Working with Michael, I developed a strategy for transferring the funds in a way that was completely legal, but would protect them from any interference. Because I was still a few months shy of 21, we needed to be careful about how we proceeded. The key is to demonstrate that you are following your father's explicit wishes, Michael advised. We have ample documentation that this money was intended specifically for your education and your future. While I was making these preparations, I also began looking for new housing. My current apartment was known to my mother, and I worried about her showing up to pressure me in person. I found a small but secure apartment in a building with controlled access where I could move once the semester ended. I also built a support network of friends who understood what I was going through. My best friend Jasmine offered her couch if I ever needed a place to stay, and my work supervisor at the campus bookstore, noting my distress, offered flexible scheduling to accommodate whatever I needed to handle my family situation. Throughout this process, I experienced waves of doubt and guilt. Was I overreacting? Was I being selfish? These questions would creep in during quiet moments, usually late at night when my defenses were down. But then I would remember my father staying up late to work on budgets, driving his old car for years longer than he should have, all to build this fund for me. I would remember his words, "Education is the one thing nobody can ever take away from you." And I would remember my mother's cold eyes as she said, "Amelia deserves it more than you." The emotional preparation was perhaps the hardest part. I had to accept that my actions might mean the complete severing of my relationship with my mother. As strained as it was, she was my only living parent, and some childish part of me still craved her approval and love. But I had to face the reality that the mother I longed for, the one who would put my needs first, or at least consider them equal to Amelia's, did not exist. After 2 weeks of careful planning, everything was in place. I had new accounts established, a clear legal strategy documentation of my father's intentions, and emotional support from friends who understood what was at stake. I had also secured new housing and made arrangements to move within the month. The day before I planned to transfer the funds, my mother called, her voice dripping with false concern. "Nadia, honey, we have not heard from you about our discussion. Amelia needs to confirm her enrollment, and we need to know if we can count on your support." I took a deep breath, sticking to the script Michael and I had prepared. "I am still thinking about it, Mom. It is a big decision, and I want to be sure I am doing the right thing." "Well, do not take too long," she said, a hint of steel beneath the sweetness. "Families should be able to count on each other. I would hate for this to create unnecessary tension between us." "I understand," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I will let you know soon." That night, I barely slept, running through the plan in my mind, preparing for every contingency. By morning, I felt exhausted, but resolute. It was time to take control of my future, to honor my father's memory and wishes, and to establish boundaries that should never have been necessary with my own mother. With trembling fingers but a determined heart, I began the process that would protect my father's final gift and change my relationship with my mother forever. The calls began almost immediately after I executed my plan. My phone buzzed incessantly with my mother's name flashing on the screen. I let the first several go to voicemail, needing to steady myself before the inevitable confrontation. Her messages escalated quickly, from casual inquiries about when we might talk to increasingly frantic demands that I call her right away about an urgent matter. Finally, I texted her, suggesting we meet at a coffee shop near campus, a public place where she would be less likely to create a scene. She agreed immediately, which told me just how desperate she was to talk to me. I arrived early, choosing a table in the center of the busy cafe, where plenty of people would witness any interaction. I ordered a tea I doubted I would drink, and waited, mentally rehearsing what I would say. My mother swept in 20 minutes later, looking immaculate as always, in designer clothes, her hair perfectly styled. But her eyes betrayed her, darting around nervously before landing on me. The smile she plastered on her face as she approached did not reach those eyes. "Nadia, darling," she said, taking the seat across from me. "I have been trying to reach you. We need to talk about Amelia's enrollment deposit. The deadline is approaching, and we need to make arrangements for the fund transfer." I took a deep breath, keeping my face neutral. "There will not be a transfer, Mom." She blinked, her smile faltering slightly. "What do you mean we discuss this? Amelia needs that money for Westfield." "No," I said simply. "The money stays where my father intended it, in my education fund." A flash of irritation crossed her face before she leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Honey, I understand you are feeling uncertain, but this is what families do. They support each other. With your scholarship, you simply do not need all that money right now." "I have transferred the funds," I said quietly, watching as confusion replaced the false warmth in her expression. "Transferred? What are you talking about?" "I have moved my college fund to new accounts, ones that only I can access. The money is secure and will be used exactly as Dad intended for my education and future." Her face went through a remarkable transformation, shock giving way to disbelief, then anger rising like a tide. "You did what you had no right to do. That account was in my name as custodian." "Actually, I had every right," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I worked with Dad's attorney to ensure everything was done legally. The money was always mine, left to me by my father for my education. I simply secured it." Her face flushed red as she realized what had happened. "You went behind my back, after everything I have done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Mom?" "Since Dad died, you have barely been present in my life, except when you wanted something. And now you wanted to take away his final gift to me and give it to your stepdaughter." "I am still your mother," she hissed, her composure cracking. "You cannot just take matters into your own hands like this. I will contest this. Gregory knows plenty of attorneys." "You can try," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "But I have documentation of Dad's explicit intentions for the fund, as well as records of your recent attempts to redirect it against his wishes and mine. I also have recorded conversations where you threatened to take the money regardless of my consent. Our state has single-party consent for recordings, by the way." She stared at the folder without touching it, her face pale now. "You recorded our conversations, your own mother." "I protected myself when it became clear you would not," I corrected her. "What kind of mother asks her daughter to give up her education fund for a stepsister? What kind of mother tells her own child that someone else deserves it more?" The cafe continued to buzz with activity around us, oblivious to the family implosion happening at our small table. My mother glanced around, suddenly aware of our public setting and the need to maintain appearances. "This is not over," she said, her voice low and threatening. "You have no idea what you have done. This selfish action will have consequences for our family." "We stopped being a family when you chose Amelia over me," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice, despite the pain lancing through my heart. "When you decided that Dad's wishes and my future were less important than your new husband's daughter." She stood abruptly, grabbing her designer purse. "You will regret this, Nadia. When you need us, when you realize how childish and short-sighted you have been, do not expect open arms." "I never did," I said softly, but she was already walking away, back straight, head high, every inch the dignified woman she presented to the world, while leaving behind a daughter she had been willing to sacrifice. The aftermath was exactly as I had anticipated. My phone exploded with texts and calls, not just from my mother, but now from Amelia and Gregory as well. Amelia's messages veered between self-righteous anger, "How dare you ruin my future out of spite," and attempts at manipulation. "I thought we were sisters." Gregory's were coldly threatening, mentioning potential legal actions and family responsibilities. I blocked their numbers one by one, keeping only my mother's unblocked in case there was ever a genuine emergency. but I did not answer her calls either, letting everything go to voicemail where I could screen the content. Then came the social media onslaught. Amelia posted vague but pointed messages about toxic family members and people who pretend to care but are actually selfish. She never named me directly, but her circle of friends began sending me messages expressing their disappointment in how I was treating my family. The most painful part came when my mother reached out to old family friends and distant relatives, spinning a narrative about me refusing to help my stepsister in her time of need, portraying me as selfish and ungrateful. Several family acquaintances I had known since childhood sent me confused, hurt messages asking why I would be so uncooperative. I did not engage with the social media drama or attempt to correct the false narrative my mother was spreading. Instead, I focused on my move to the new apartment, my summer job, and preparation for my upcoming transfer to the state university. I surrounded myself with people who knew the truth and supported my decision. Through it all, I held on to a simple truth: my father had worked hard to give me this opportunity, this foundation for my future. I would not dishonor his memory by allowing his sacrifice to be redirected to someone he had never even met, someone who had already wasted multiple educational opportunities. About a month after our coffee shop confrontation, I received a final text message from my mother. "I have always put your best interests first, even when you could not see it. Your selfishness has broken this family. When you are ready to apologize and make amends, you know how to reach me." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a complex mix of anger, sadness, and surprisingly relief. In her inability to acknowledge any wrongdoing, in her continued insistence that I was the problem, she had finally freed me from the last lingering doubts. I did not respond to the message. Instead, I moved forward, carrying my father's love and support with me, in the form of the secure future he had worked so hard to provide. The first few months after the confrontation with my mother were some of the hardest of my life. Despite knowing I had made the right decision, grief washed over me in unexpected waves. I was mourning not only the mother I had, but the mother I had always wished she could be. I was grieving the final death of the fantasy that someday she would put me first, or even consider me equal to her new family. Sometimes in the quiet darkness of my new apartment, doubts would creep in. Had I overreacted? Would a more understanding daughter have found a compromise? These thoughts would torture me until morning light, when I would remember her cold eyes saying those unforgivable words: "Amelia deserves it more than you." I found myself drawn to the campus counseling center, where a compassionate therapist named Dr. Mason helped me navigate the complex emotions of essentially losing my second parent, this time by choice rather than death. "What you are experiencing is called ambiguous grief," she explained during one session. "You are mourning someone who is still physically present in the world, but emotionally absent from your life. It can be more complicated than grieving a death because there is no closure, no finality." Through weekly sessions, I began to untangle the web of guilt, anger, and sadness that had ensnared me. I learned that setting boundaries, even painful ones, was not selfish, but necessary for my well-being. I began to understand that my mother's behavior reflected her own issues and choices, not my worth or deservingness. "You cannot control her actions or make her be the mother you deserve," Dr. Mason told me, "but you can build a life filled with people who value and respect you." And slowly, I did exactly that. My small circle of friends became my chosen family. Jasmine, my best friend since freshman year, included me in her family's holiday celebrations. My work supervisor at the campus bookstore, Linda, took a maternal interest in my well-being, checking in regularly and offering guidance when I sought it. I also formed a close bond with Michael, my father's attorney friend, and his wife, Sarah, who invited me for Sunday dinners and offered both practical advice and emotional support. They had known my father well and shared stories about him that helped keep his memory alive for me. As I settled into my sophomore year at the state university, I threw myself into my studies with renewed purpose. Every class I excelled in, every paper I wrote, every project I completed felt like a tribute to my father and a vindication of my decision to protect his gift. The scholarship that had inadvertently triggered my mother's scheme proved to be even more valuable than just financial assistance. It connected me with other recipients, ambitious students from various backgrounds who shared my commitment to education. We formed study groups and friendship bonds that sustained me through difficult periods. My housing situation improved dramatically as well. With the security of my protected college fund, I was able to find a small but comfortable apartment near campus, shared with a responsible roommate who became another member of my chosen family. For the first time since my father's death, I felt a sense of stability and safety. Occasionally, I would receive updates about my mother and her family through mutual acquaintances or social media glimpses. Amelia had apparently enrolled in Westfield after all, with Gregory covering the costs. She dropped out before completing the first semester, pivoting to an entrepreneurial opportunity in social media marketing that quickly faded. My mother continued her life of luxury as Gregory's wife, posting carefully curated images of their travels and social events, never acknowledging my absence from her life. These updates no longer devastated me as they once might have. Instead, they reinforced that I had made the right choice in separating myself from their toxic dynamics. As my 21st birthday approached, I felt a symbolic weightlifting. I would now have full legal control over my finances, removing any lingering threat that my mother might somehow access what remained of my college fund. To celebrate this milestone, my friends organized a small gathering with cake and thoughtful gifts surrounding me with genuine love and support. "Your dad would be so proud of you," Michael told me during that celebration, his eyes misting slightly. "Not just for your academic achievements, but for your strength and integrity. You honored his memory in the best possible way." Those words touched me deeply, validating the painful choice I had made and the difficult path I had walked since. I realized that through this ordeal, I had discovered my own resilience and values. I had learned to trust my judgment and stand firm in the face of manipulation and pressure. As I progressed through my undergraduate program, maintaining my excellent academic record while working part-time, I began to consider graduate school. The remaining funds from my father, carefully managed and supplemented by scholarships and my own earnings, would make this dream possible. I imagined how pleased he would be to know that his foresight and sacrifice were enabling me to pursue advanced education, to reach higher than either of us had initially imagined. During my senior year, I met Eric, a kind and thoughtful engineering student, who gradually became an important part of my life. When our relationship became serious enough for me to meet his family, I was overwhelmed by the warm welcome I received, so different from the calculating assessment I had experienced with Gregory. Eric's mother, Barbara, enveloped me in a hug the moment we met. "We have heard so much about you," she said with genuine warmth. "Anyone who works as hard as you do and has overcome so much belongs at our table." That simple acceptance brought tears to my eyes, showing me what family support could and should look like. I had not realized how much I had been missing until I experienced it again after so long. The culmination of my undergraduate journey arrived on a bright May morning as I donned my cap and gown for graduation. As I waited in line to process into the ceremony, I felt both triumphant and wistful. I had achieved what my father and I had planned together, but he was not there to witness it. Neither was my mother, who had not responded to the formal invitation I had sent in a final gesture of reconciliation. But looking out into the audience as I crossed the stage to receive my diploma, I saw a row of beaming faces: Michael and Sarah Jasmine and her parents Linda from the bookstore, my roommate and other friends, and Eric, all cheering for me. They had become my family chosen and built through genuine connection rather than mere biology. That night, as I carefully placed my diploma next to a photograph of my father, I realized that while I had lost much, I had also gained wisdom that would guide me for the rest of my life. I understood now that family is defined by actions, not titles, by support, not obligation, by love that empowers rather than controls. I also realized that my father's gift had been far more than financial. He had shown me through his example what it means to love someone unselfishly, to sacrifice for their future, to believe in their potential. These lessons would remain with me long after the college fund was depleted. As I prepared to begin graduate studies in the fall, I found myself more at peace with my past than I had ever expected to be. The pain had not disappeared, but it had transformed into understanding and growth. I had learned to recognize toxic relationships and the courage to walk away from them, even when doing so broke my heart. I had learned that sometimes loving yourself means making difficult choices that others may never understand or forgive. Most importantly, I had learned that while we cannot choose the family we are born into, we can choose the family we create through genuine connections built on mutual respect and love. And in that chosen family, I had found healing support and the strength to build a future that would honor my father's memory and fulfill the potential he had always seen in me. So if you ever find yourself faced with a choice between honoring someone who is gone, but loved you truly, and appeasing someone who is present, but loves you conditionally, choose the love that sets you free, rather than the approval that binds you. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most authentic life. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from family members who did not have your best interests at heart? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and creating boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into.